Mark Walter has agreed to purchase the Los Angeles Lakers for $10 billion.
And for just a couple million more, I know where he can buy a podcast to go with it. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rain City Rebound, the podcast, where we cover the return of the Seattle Sonics. I'm Glenn Dreyfus. Zaiem, our top story this week is a no-brainer. The announcement of a Lenny Wilkens statue to be unveiled Saturday, June 28th, outside of Climate Pledge Arena.
Yeah, we're going to have our third art statue crafted by Lucella, I believe is the pronunciation, the same artist who made the Ken Griffey Jr. and Edgar Martinez statues in front of T-Mobile Park, which is where the Mariners play. And now we're getting one of Lenny Wilkens, the great Sonics legend. He is a 9-time All-Star and is the only player, or only person rather, to be elected to the Basketball Hall of Fame 3 different ways: as a player, as a coach, and as an Olympian. There will be an unveiling that morning, and then there will be an after party sometime, we don't know exactly when, in the 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock-ish hour, kind of playing it by ear at Queen Anne Beer Hall, where there'll be a celebration and an open public event to celebrate the great Lenny Wilkens.
Podcasts have unlimited length, and we still don't have enough time to list everything that Lenny Wilkens has done in his incredible career. He's actually in 6 different halls of fame. He won a world championship with the Sonics in '79, won a gold medal as assistant coach with the Dream Team in '92, was head coach of the Team USA that won the gold medal in '96, first NBA coach with 1,000 wins, top 10 NBA coaches of all time, according to one NBA vote. And also, he's the only person to be both a coach on that list of all-timers and one of the top 50 NBA players. He won the Chuck Daly Lifetime Achievement Award, and I'm only halfway through. What I'd like everybody to do is go to the Rain City Rebound website, and we've done a 5-part series outlining parts of Lenny Wilkens' incredible career, and including all this list of accomplishments and a long list that I haven't even gone into and won't. But he's an incredible man, and also has been incredible for the city off the court, as well as accomplishments on the court during his playing and coaching career.
And one thing that people might not realize is what an icon he is, because he did win the championship in '79. That was 45 years ago. The median age of the U.S. person is younger than that. So over half the population wasn't even alive to see the Sonics win the title, let alone remember it. And a lot of his accomplishments through the 60s, 70s, and then throughout the 90s, it was a while ago. And if you weren't around to see the accomplishments and to witness them firsthand, it sort of fades off to history. And then you have the sense of this person is important, but not necessarily know why. And as you said, we could go on for a long time about all the accomplishments of Lenny Wilkens, and he really is truly one of the greats in not just Seattle sports history, but in pro sports history, especially in basketball.
Just given that the statue is being made by the same person who did the Griffey and Edgar statues, please someone check and make sure that Lenny isn't holding a baseball bat.
Oh yeah, that would be embarrassing.
Yeah, you don't want that. But
in the first 2 iterations, Ken Griffey Jr. is like shooting a basketball. I'm like, no, it's the wrong sport. So, and at the top of the show, we mentioned the sale of the Los Angeles Lakers. Every time an NBA team changes hands, this indirectly impacts the return of the Sonics.
And what do you think this will do besides drive maybe the price up a little bit more?
I am maybe a little concerned that these prices are getting maybe a little too high. It's one thing when we think the expansion fee is going to be 2 billion or 3 billion, but what if it gets into 7 or 8 or 9 billion? Is there a price point where this starts to become too expensive for the presumptive Sonics ownership led by Samantha Holloway? Or are these just kind of arbitrary numbers and that they will essentially pay whatever the market value is, which does seem to be getting much, much higher than I think anyone expected?
I'm not sure that the sale of the Lakers, one of the marquee franchisers in the entire league, should necessarily correlate to the expansion fee for a team that, well, yes, they have history, but it's Sonics 1.0 history. It's not the LA Lakers. It's not the Boston Celtics. But Forbes magazine had, Zaiem, an interesting take on the Lakers sale and speculating that it might negatively impact on one expansion hopeful, but not Seattle. Quoting, just to play devil's advocate on Vegas, the NBA already has a large footprint in the city between annual Summer League showcases and NBA Cup played there. The once plucky story of Vegas as a pro sports city is gone. It's a Golden Knights town that also happens to have the Raiders and soon the Athletics. The NBA adding team number 4 to the mix has questionable appeal on its face. Forbes isn't saying that Vegas is out of the running by any means, just that if this is a wrinkle, it may not be a wrinkle so much for Seattle as it is for Vegas.
Vegas has so much more they need to figure out in order to be ready for expansion. They don't know who's going to own the team, which then affects who or where they play. And so are they going to build an arena? Is it the Oakview group building an arena? Is it this other group that's building an arena? Are they going to spend the $300 million to renovate T-Mobile Arena? I want to say T-Mobile Park, but that's the Mariners Stadium here. T-Mobile Arena, where the Golden Knights play in Vegas. So significant expenditure has to happen regardless of where the future NBA TBD Las Vegas team would play. So they don't know where they're playing. They don't know who's owning it. And then, of course, they don't have a brand. They don't have colors. They don't have a fan base yet. All of this stuff has to happen in ways that Seattle already has done. Seattle has an arena. Seattle has an owner that's suitable. We already know what the team name and colors will likely be, barring an extraordinarily bizarre decision by the ownership to not use the Sonics names and colors, which I can't imagine happening. And then also the fan base is already here. Seattle already has Sonics fans. We already walk around. We see people in Sonics gear today. Vegas doesn't have any of these benefits right now. And so Seattle is a much more mature expansion market than Vegas. And that makes sense that if there's a wrinkle, it's going to affect the uncertain situation much more than the I won't say absolutely certain, but certainly there's much less uncertainty around the Seattle expansion bid.
And I certainly agree with you on that. And the Kraken ownership has already spoken about the Sonics. So I also agree it's highly unlikely that the team would come back with a different name. But speaking specifically about expansion to Seattle, there were 2 media takes since our last podcast. I'm going to share both with you. You can decide which one you like better. I kind of already have an idea. Washington Post columnist Jerry Brewer, who used to write for the Seattle Times, said he thinks more patience will be necessary. Quoting, I think it could probably take up until right around this time next year before we have greater clarity on whether this is going to happen or not. And that's why I think a 3-year timeline is realistic. But ESPN's Mark J. Spears said this: a high-level person in the NBA said the league is leaning toward perhaps expansion coming soon this summer. So take the take you like and stick with that.
And we're going to know more in the first couple weeks of July when the NBA Board of Governors meets, and they're going to address expansion in some fashion, according to Commissioner Adam Silver, and we'll get more clarity there around what the temperature is around the league and what the appetite is for expansion. It sounds like they're leaning, yes, we want to expand. It sounds pretty firmly in that direction. I'm going to exercise a little bit of caution, even though I'm very optimistic. I'm very optimistic that this is going to happen, but it's a $10 billion transaction potentially. So a lot of things can go wrong.
In the category of topics we'd rather not have to discuss, last Sunday, the Oklahoma City Thunder won the NBA title for the first time since leaving Seattle in 2008. Let me pose this to you, Zaiem. How should Sonics feel about this? How do you feel about this?
I'm very, very sad for the Indiana Pacers. This felt inevitable with the team that Oklahoma City built and the talent they have and the draft capital they've had and Sam Presti being an incredible GM. It was just a matter of time before I hate to say it, but this dynasty is just getting started. So if you're a Sonics fan and you're watching this, I think the appropriate feeling is abject despair would be probably my lean. The unsavory outcomes for the NBA finals are going to continue because they're such a good team, Glenn. They're so loaded. They have the MVP. They have 3 top 30 players. They have a bunch of draft capital they can use to upgrade their roster. It's a disaster. This is just absolutely a disaster. I think it is a catastrophic scenario for a team that's moved. I know that Bill Simmons and Chuck Klosterman had a discussion about this, and the only one that they felt was probably worse was the Brooklyn Dodgers moving. This is in that vein. So expansion can't get here soon enough because somehow, despite not even having an NBA team, Seattle sports finds a way to be devastated after the NBA finals.
By the way, Unsavory Outcome is the name of my indie band.
Ew.
But let me share some Seattle media reactions to the Thunder championship. Jason Puckett wrote this in the Tacoma News Tribune. Nothing generates as much sheer, unadulterated glee for me as watching the Oklahoma City Thunder lose. Brent Stecker at Seattle Sports wrote, salt is poured in those old wounds as the same trophy the Sonics won 46 years ago is lifted in OKC. Sports anchor Adam Levine of Fox 13 announced the Game 7 result without ever saying the words Oklahoma City Thunder.
Finally tonight, unfortunately, the Indiana Pacers lose Game 7 of the NBA Finals. Big game for the Sounders tomorrow. We will see you out at Lumen Field.
And blogger Danny O'Neill, no bitterness here, said, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander is a shameless flopper, and Alex Caruso and Lou Dort function like a pro wrestling tag team.
I did really enjoy the Aaron Levine one that was going around and it was viral. And that's how I felt. It's just the Indiana Pacers have lost Game 7. That's too bad. So,
well, the big takeaway for me, my reaction is when Tyrese Halliburton went down with his Achilles tendon injury in Game 7, the NBA should have stopped the game. They should have suspended it until Halliburton finished his rehab, his surgery and his rehab. I don't care if that's the middle of next season. Declare the title vacant. Go on and start the next season. When Tyrese says he's ready to play, take a break, and then finish game 7. It's the only fair way to do it because Indiana was on their way to upsetting Oklahoma City. And so I don't feel like they ever really earned it. So there.
We were robbed. We were robbed of a great game 7 because of that injury. And it's really devastating. I was looking forward a lot to game 7. And then when the injury happened, it just felt like, well, all right, I guess that's the end of that. And maybe Oklahoma City still wins. I don't know, but I would love to have seen what Indiana could have done with their best player not injured. But this is the trouble. We live in troubled times, Glenn, and part of those troubled times involve the defending NBA champions, the Oklahoma City basketball team. The only thing that will really allow us to think less about Oklahoma City is getting another NBA team in Seattle to root for. One group, more than any other, has kept a Sonics flame burning ever since they left.
All right. So, Cedric, I imagine you've done a lot of professional interviews with people over the years. This won't be one of them.
Perfect. This is exactly what I signed up for. Like, please, I'm so sick of the other stuff. Like,
I know professionals. They're so like, let's do things the right way, and
way out of touch.
Cedric Walker with twin sister Ava performs as the Seattle-based rock duo, the Blacktones. And the review site Going Left has described their music as, quote, a sonic extension of the Twins' humor. And how appropriate is that? Because Sonic, he's also involved with the movement Seattle NBA Fans. And we're going to talk about both. Cedric, thank you for making time for us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, you guys. I really appreciate being on here.
The most pressing question for you right off the bat, of course, Cedric, is what's it like having a sister who's a ventriloquist? And has she ever pranked you by throwing her voice?
She has never pranked me. And there is a reason she is the lead singer. If I started singing, the crowd would just disperse and leave the show immediately. So she told me, Cedric, you're playing drums. You're great back there. And she's right. I'm a really good Luigi to her Mario. I'm the great background. She has the pipes, the vocals, the everything.
And when you learned what a good singer she was, it almost brought you to tears, right?
Oh my God, you read that? Yes, it did. She likes to tell people, "Oh, he was bawling." Like, no, it was a few little tears. I didn't know she could sing, and I thought she told me everything. We're twins, I tell her everything. And when I first heard her sing, I think I was a sophomore in high school. I was moved and I was like, hey, we got to make this a thing, Eva. We got to put a band together. Let's do it.
She has that really lovely, heavy vibrato that is so technically difficult. It's really interesting that it was something that it seems like it was discovered and not developed and cultivated through vocal training over the years. That's really interesting.
Yeah, she's very naturally talented, just naturally gifted. Eva's the one that actually taught me how to play drums. Eva would tell me, and she said this in other interviews too, like, we'd be driving home from school. My grandpa would pick us up in the car and she would just hear music like in the engine as we were driving. Or she would hear music when something random when the window was going up and down. Like, she's always had this natural ability to just hear things by ear. And that was something that I was like, you know what, Eva, I'm your twin brother. I'm a little more engineer brain, but I can still play the drum. I can figure this drum thing out for you. Okay, so just show me the basics and I'll pick it up after that. And that's what she did for me.
Cedric, you were a high school basketball player in your own right. So in your growing up, how were the Sonics a part of your life?
Oh, man, they were a huge part of my life. My grandfather was the biggest NBA fan, and he, watched the Sonics all the time. I watched with him. He had his 1979 championship T-shirt hanging up in the closet. He worked at Boeing. He was part of the fan group that decided on what the team's name was going to be and stuff like that. So basketball was just heavily in my household, growing up with my grandparents. And so, when I had a chance to jump into sports, of course, he was like, hey, Cedric, you want to shoot some hoops? And, I did. And I was hooked ever since.
Talk to us about Seattle NBA fans. What is Seattle NBA fans, and what is your role with it? And are the Sonics coming back, Cedric?
Yeah. That last question is a lot of
Loaded
pressure.
question.
Yeah. So Seattle NBA fans is a volunteer group of NBA fans. We care about obviously the past. We love the history of Sonics basketball. We love the history of NBA in Seattle. We also care about the future and the potential for Seattle, basketball to be back in Seattle, and the potential for the Sonics to return. It's a great group, and when I had the opportunity to be a part of it and become the spokesperson, I knew where my home was. I was like, yeah, that's what I want to do. I am an avid Sonics fan, just through and through. I still have all of my Sonics gear hanging up in the closet, waiting to dust it off when the time is right. And being able to be the spokesperson for the group was an honor, and it's something that I feel like, just as a fan, hopefully I can, have other fans from Seattle kind of step forward, and we can reveal our massive Sonics fans are still here, so the NBA knows that Seattle's ready, and we've been ready. Even when they left, we're still ready.
In 2 of the last 4 years, Cedric, the store Simply Seattle has generated about $1 million in revenue solely through the sales of Sonics merchandise, which to me is incredible. I was wondering if you had any insight on why you think the passion for the team has stayed so robust.
Yes, yeah. The Sonics were so ingrained in the culture of Seattle. And again, I can go back to, as far back as the fan vote. This is before I was born, when they were deciding the name, all the way through to the 90s when, the Kemp and Payton era kind of also helped elevate Seattle, while Seattle was also going through a music renaissance at the same time. All these things were so ingrained in the city, it became part of our identity, So to see it go away was something that was, obviously it was a bit of a hole that was left in the city. It was something that was a hard pill for all of us to swallow. But, anyone who's from Seattle, and most people who have come here and decided to live here, understand that this is a sports town and we love our teams. And although the Sonics have not been here for quite some time, the fact that they are still alive and well in the city is a testament to the fandom that is still here. You can go anywhere in the country, and other people in other cities and states are telling you, oh, the Sonics need to come back. The Sonics need to come back. They understand how big of a deal it is up here, So, and I take pride in that as well,
And the Sonics did not move because of lack of fan support.
Right.
They were wildly popular. It was other external factors.
Right.
It was rabid all the way up until the very last game. And
right.
The fans, I want, because there's been some narrative about that recently. And I really wanted to be clear that the fans here are great. The Sonics fans love and still love the team.
Yeah, 100%. And again, like, we can extend it beyond the Sonic. Go look at the Mariners attendance. You know what I mean? Like, the team is top 15 at least, maybe top 10 in attendance, 11-ish, almost every year. And it's something that's like, sure, the team hasn't ever been to a World Series, like they kind of fluctuate on and off. But Seattle's just such a great sports town, bring in the Sounders. That stadium gets packed, right? Bring in the Kraken. Everyone's showing up to the games, you know what I mean? So Seattle is hungry for sports and eagerly awaiting the Sonics to come back.
Tell us more about what Seattle NBA fans does, how people can get involved with it if they haven't heard about the movement and the website previously.
Well, yeah, again, so it's a fan group that is basically trying to bring fans together and get ready and show the NBA that we're ready for NBA basketball to be here. You can go to the website, www.seattlenbafans.com. If you want to be a part of it, if you have a corporate company or things like that, Seattle NBA fans do activation events where you can, we can do Sonic theme events. You can have, Sonic theme or Sasquatch theme events and stuff like that. it's meant to kind of keep that pulse going of Sonic's fandom in the town. And so when the time comes when expansion is presented, everyone knows this town is still ready and the fandom is and the fans are ready to explode.
I don't have to tell you that these are fractured times, but you must believe that sports teams and the Sonics in particular are a way to bring diverse people together.
Oh yeah, and again, you can look at history just to see how that happened. My grandfather used to tell me about how, when Lenny Wilkens was running the show, and Seattle was still a very much redlined city, and sports at that time really brought the city together. That's something I feel like sports really does a great job at. And in this day and age, Seattle obviously has changed since the tech boom has arrived. And, there is your kind of old school Sonic fans, but you have these new Sonic fans that are ready and that are waiting for a team to arrive. And this opportunity here, especially as Seattle NBA fans, is an opportunity to bring together that fandom of, your old kind of Kemp 90s Lenny Wilkens fans and these new fans, the people who have decided to move to Seattle or people who are, newly born and stuff like that, who have never been here when there's a team. It's a chance to bring us all together under this new umbrella of a beautiful brand new team, that we can all get behind and support.
Zaiem, Cedric has mentioned Lenny Wilkens a couple of times. Why don't we pivot to talking about the statue and what Lenny Wilkens in particular has meant to the Sonics and to the city?
Yeah, I mean, Lenny, and I mean, obviously you guys probably also know too, you guys can jump in here as well. Besides his obviously championship ring and, basketball stardom, he was also, he is also a pillar in the community. He has his foundation, he gives back to the city. He's a Seattleite. And that's also important. Not only did you come to the city and you brought us our one and only championship, but you also brought other things to help people and help the city grow. And, that's a testament to the person he is, a testament to, how he felt he was received, when he came to Seattle. The give back was real for him. And that's why he's so cherished in the community.
And we have a statue that is being unveiled of Lenny Wilkens this Saturday on June 28th. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I know it's a special moment for Lenny Wilkens, and I know it's a special moment for the city to go out and celebrate him. And I know that, it's long overdue. But yeah, I'm excited for it. I'm super excited for it.
And there's some interest in extending Lenny Wilkens Way all the way down to the waterfront. What do you think that represents to the people of Seattle?
Yeah, I mean, look at the word, you just used, like extend, that's what Lenny Wilkens did. He did more than just basketball, he extended himself to the community. And really what it is just another way to honor him, and another way to show our respect for everything that he's done for Seattle. And I know I also brought up Kemp and Peyton, but he is definitely one of those pillars, that help kind of Seattle grow in terms of having the basketball fandom and becoming such a big sports town that we are now.
It's less talked about and well known, but Cedric, Lenny does talk extensively, did in his autobiography, about the immense amount of racism that he had to overcome back in the day, and even in 2025 it's still there. But he decided there were two ways to go. He could either let it be a roadblock in his way, or he was going to overcome it. And clearly he overcame it, all the way back to his college days in Providence, when he was an economics major and his professors were like, "Oh, you know about economics, and you have a brain," all the way to he wanted to coach the dream team in '96. And there was a time when, well, you don't, as a black man, expect you're going to get to coach, or that black players are perceived to be only to have raw talent, where the white players are the ones who have to succeed because of their smarts. So in the black community, and for a lot of us who aren't black, he's really a role model of achievement in so many ways. And I'm hoping you'll speak to that.
Yeah, and I mean that's 100% beautifully said, and I think it's one of the reasons, but obviously besides basketball, that my grandfather was so attached to the story of Lenny Wilkens and everything he went through, and just to share a personal story, my grandpa went through the same thing. He went to college, he graduated from Tuskegee, he became a college professor. But in the South, they told him, black people aren't engineers. That's no, sorry, So obviously he couldn't find a job down there. And black people wasn't quite the word they used, but I'll leave that to you guys' imagination. No joke. So he came to Seattle, and Boeing gave him a chance, and he got a chance to work on the space program, and he moved up here in I think it was 67, 68. And was an electrical engineer and was the first lead black engineer of the project. And he had to overcome, and I think most people in that generation, share that story. Similar, most black people share that story. And so when my grandfather could watch someone like Lenny Wilkens achieve what he was doing, you can only imagine, how he felt. It was, looking back, I can tell that it was more than just basketball for my grandfather. It was about cheering for this person that was overcoming the odds and the situations that, he similarly had to go through.
Overcoming the odds to be an NBA player, to be an NBA coach. I mean, that's a 1 in a million, no matter what color you are. And then on top of that,
that's right.
But what's interesting to me is Lenny Wilkens didn't think he was going to be an NBA player. He thought he was going to be an economics teacher.
Right. Let alone the coach. Yeah, exactly. Right.
And then to be the player coach, like doing either one of those, that's not enough of a challenge.
Right. Exactly. And so it's just a testament also to, having that willpower to not be broken down, and to not let the unfortunate circumstances of, that time and, those situations stop him from the goal that he was achieving.
Still applies today. That people are still racist. People still tell people of color that it hasn't been cured. So having I think those inspirational stories, they transcend generations, and they're very, very meaningful today, just as they were 30, 40 years ago.
That's a transition to the activism that's part of the Black Tones. So if you'd like to speak to that.
Yeah, for sure. And just to circle back, by no means do I want to, minimize the racism or anything that's going on today. But I also do like to take the time to talk about the strides that were made to get to where we are today. Obviously there's so much more work to do, but I do think sometimes we forget, hey, we have come a long way, and the three of us are on this podcast right now talking together and things, you know what I mean? There are good people, and there's always a way forward, and, I always say to myself, if my grandfather and Lenny Wilkens and other people can be strong and fight through and help turn over something like Jim Crow, I can fight through the times today and help change, the things going on today. To your point about the Black Tones, that is a perfect segue into that. The Black Tones, we don't try to do anything that's, wag your finger, this and that. We try to just tell a story, The history of rock and roll is Black. And, my sister tells this story a lot. She got her first guitar her sophomore year. And, a lot of the people at school, it didn't matter what color you were, black, white, Asian, whatever. They would tell her, "Oh, why are you carrying the guitar? You know, or are you trying to be white, or why you act white? You know, this, that, and the other." And even I can share stories of myself. Because I've been born and raised, and I grew up in Seattle, and I have friends in other places, and like, "Oh, you sound white," or this, that, and I'm like, well, to articulate when you speak doesn't necessarily mean you only sound white. You know what I mean? Like you can articulate and just be a human being. Also with my sister, like, to play rock and roll, and this was the sad part, is a lot of people don't know the history of rock and roll. A lot of people don't understand that.
Look, I mean, way back to Elvis and what
right,
and
who
the other
he was
white
influenced
artists.
by. Right, if you can, and these come up at shows when we're on tour, when we're taking national tours, and we ask people like, who's heard of Led Zeppelin or the Beatles, and they're like, "Oh yeah." And then we talk about the people they were influenced by, like who's heard of like Howlin' Wolf and, like Chuck Berry and some of these other people, you know what I mean? And people are like, "Oh, well, we didn't know that." Well, yeah, like, and so it's funny because people would accuse us for kind of like acting white, but it's like, actually we're doing like the blackest thing ever. You know what I mean? Like, and they just didn't know the history, so a lot of it is just a bit of a history lesson when we're going out and we're playing the music, and people are loving it and they're asking how we got into it. That said, music is for everybody. You know what I mean? Like, music isn't for one race. The white guy or Asian dude that wants to be a rapper, great, go do it. The black person wants to play rock, do it. You know what I mean? Like, there shouldn't be oh, it has to be this way or that way. Like, no, there's no rules in music. God, no.
One thing I noticed listening to your music is, especially the album Cobain and Cornbread, which is a really great name.
Thank you.
No drum fills, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Why? That's a really interesting choice. Why is that?
I think we really wanted to get to the root of blues and just really easy rock and roll. I like to tell people that we marry punk and blues. And, if you get into the real like bluesy stuff, there's no filler. There's no, extra stuff. It's very rootsy. And for us, it works. The thing is we, I'll speak for me. I don't want to speak for you, but I like to play, and I like when people get put in a bit of a trance, and maybe that beat's kind of going for a long time, but after a while, I start to see the crowd move, and they start to grab into that beat, and they understand how to move to that beat now. I've never been like a super mathy rock guy, and that's not a knock at people who are into mathy rock. That's great too. From my perspective, when I'm performing in front of other crowds, like some of the feedback I get, whether we were in Scotland or we were in Philadelphia one night, some people like the simplicity of the music, and it helps them follow along a little bit easier, actually. And so it's actually proven to be a bit of a strength for us. But some people like the more math rock, and that's fine. That's the great thing about music. Like I said, there's no rules. Like, you can do whatever you want. People can like whatever they like, or, move on to the next thing, right?
And for those who don't know, what is math rock?
It's a little bit more like, how could I don't know. I don't know if the listeners know who like Rush is or something like that, but it's a little more complicated. Like maybe a few more fills, a little more offbeat, a little more on 1 and 3 instead of 2 and 4. That's the best way I can explain it. I hope I explained that good enough, but yeah, that's what math rock is a little more like. Jazz could also be placed in there, because jazz, you have to be. I definitely don't claim to be a super talented musician. I'm very basic for sure. Jazz musicians and like classical and heavy metal trained musicians are like cream of the crop. for me.
Two last things from me, and then Zaiem can have the last word. But I want you to use your mind's eye, Cedric, for these last two. One is, what do you think it's going to be like when the Sonics do come back? What is that scene going to be like in the arena, outside of the arena, on Lenny Wilkens' way? Can you picture that?
I've probably had a few dreams about this already. I think this town is going to explode. I think, as we all talked about earlier, I think it's going to be one of the biggest unifying things in the history of the city. I'm really hoping that they figure out a way to set up a TV outside, like some of these other arenas do, where people walk up and like kind of watch the game and stuff like that. Because I think the city's going to be just on fire. Everyone's going to be so happy. Not that the city's not on fire for the other sports teams, because people love the Storm, people love the Kraken. You know, people are getting hyped for the new women's hockey team and stuff like that. You know, obviously we talk about mayor's stuff, but it's just going to be another layer that, as you guys know, like how do I say this? The kettle is a beyond simmer and it's ready to explode. You know what I mean? Like,
all right. And one more mind's eye question from me. And that is, as you know, there's a stage in the stands at Climate Pledge Arena where bands are invited to play at sporting events. Have you visualized in your mind one day the Black Tones performing at a Sonics game?
Oh my God. I hope they make us the house band. I really do. We've played for the Kraken a few times, and I definitely like visualize like, okay, when the Sonics come back, this is kind of what it'll be like, you know, like, and I love playing for the Kraken. Those fans are on fire. We've been there a few times and played for them. And, you know, the announcers is like, welcome back to Black Tones. And they erupt. And I'm like, oh, they remember us. This is great. Yeah, I have imagined playing up there so many times, more than you guys could probably imagine. So I'm excited for that.
Zaiem, I interrupted you earlier. What else you got?
Well, okay, so you played high school basketball, and I've always felt that drummers are athletes because it is a immensely athletic endeavor. You see a drummer at the end of the show, and they're just dripping sweat. I always wondered how being an athlete playing basketball or some other sport, and how that kind of translates to being an athlete as playing drums.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is an awesome question, and I'm glad you said it, and I'm glad I forced it out of you, because there's so much correlation that comes with the music and just sports in general. Whether in sports, if you're running a play, or if you look at some of these athletes, and it's all about rhythm sometimes. You know what I mean? And athletes talk about, oh yeah, when I get in a good rhythm. I mean, let me go back to, I was at the Kraken game and we performed, right? And they're in one of their zones on defense, and they're like gliding back and forth, all of them together in a sequence that looked like they were like dancers or something. You know what I mean? Like, it was just like, it was perfect, So that correlation between sports and music is so much there, even in soccer. You know what I mean? Like when they run their zones and stuff like that, like just the movement. Now, in terms of like basketball and drumming, yeah, you definitely have to be in shape to be a drummer. I definitely like to stay in shape. And, any good song that I've worked on or a new beat that I'm working on, it's just like running a play. I got to make sure I'm in a good rhythm. I got to make sure that I'm like lined up with the metronome, you know what I mean? Like, in that way it goes like smooth, you know what I mean? The crossover between music and just music and sports and arts in general. There are some athletes, there was a few years ago, this is before, like years ago, before Derrick Rose got injured, and the way he used to jump in the air and move his body, he was moving like a ballet dancer, you know what I mean? Like the amount of body control you have to do some of the things like athletes do and stuff, like the correlations are everywhere in terms of like sports and arts. So I hope that answers your question. I think that was a great question, and it definitely needs to be brought up.
I think especially basketball really lends itself well. I think one of the very best names in all of basketball is the Utah Jazz. It's maybe a little more appropriate when they're in New Orleans versus Utah.
Definitely.
but the improvisational nature and just feeling what your teammate is doing or what your bandmate doing, and just kind of going with the flow. I think that is such a beautiful metaphor for basketball.
Mhm.
And I love that there's a team that's named after that, because it is just really one of the really perfect names in pro sports.
Yeah, and I think it's an underrated thing that isn't brought up enough. That's why I'm glad you said it. I'm like, the correlation between music and sports and arts is just like, it's peanut butter and jelly. They just go together,
Let's close on this. The Black Tones have put out a couple of albums, and you've been on tour. So what's next for you and Eva and the Black Tones?
We are currently working on our next album. We actually, it's funny, my sister's going to hate that I say this, but I'm saying it anyway. We had the album. My sister had my beautiful niece, and then she came to me, she said, "Cedric, I have to rewrite the whole album." I was like, okay, I guess let's rewrite it. So we're going back into the studio to rewrite the album. She's on a different level now, and so I'm excited to see what comes of it. And who knows, we'll probably release that other stuff maybe before the next album, but we're going back to do another album. So.
Well, continued success. It has been a joy getting to talk to you for the first time, and I hope you'll agree to come back and talk more Seattle NBA fans and Black Tones and what constitutes a workout activity. I always like to think that being a podcast host is a workout activity. I know I'm fooling myself, but it's as close as I get. But Cedric, thank you so much. This has really been a delight. We appreciate it.
Thanks, you guys. I appreciate you guys so much for having me on. And yeah, if you welcome me back, I would love to be back. Of course, I'll talk with you guys anytime.
Our thanks again to the fabulous Cedric Walker of Seattle NBA fans and the Black Tones.
And if you want to learn more about Seattle NBA fans or the Black Tones, their links are in the show notes. And next week, we will have special coverage of the Lenny Wilkens statue unveiling. Be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps us out as we're growing the channel. And until then, we'll see you on the rebound.